Football fans all have stadiums we love, but do any of us have a pitch that we love? It might sound like an odd question, but pitches can be different sizes with big consequences. Why is that? And what are the actual rules? Back when association football started, pitches could be up to 100 metres wide and 200 metres long. That's longer than Ellen Road, not the pitch, the stadium. Anyway, UEFA wanted a standard across Europe for international matches, which became 105 metres long and 68 metres wide. But some clubs had been rebels, not intentionally, but because of the stadiums. Take Highbury, for example. It was 5 metres shorter and a metre narrower, meaning away sides had a challenge to adjust. White Hart Lane was exactly the same. And actually, when Spurs temporarily moved to Wembley, they asked the FA to shorten the pitch. The FA, very offended by the sacrilegious suggestion, said no, which in fairness could have actually benefited Tottenham because when they moved into their shiny new stadium, the pitch was exactly the same size as Wembley's. Today, Forest Pitch at the City Ground is a big un. It's 2 metres wider than any other pitch in the Premier League. But the smallest of all, Craven Cottage, just 100 metres long and 65 wide. No excuse for not tracking your man. There are a couple of crazy outliers in Europe too. At Napoli's home ground, the Stadio Diego Armando Maradona, the pitch is a whopping 110 metres long. At least they don't play on a slope like Newcastle do. There's a 2-metre incline on the pitch at St James's Park. And don't get me started on the old pitch at Yeovil too. It used to be a slant of 2 metres corner to corner and across the halfway line. So UEFA have their standards. So do the FA, but they do give pitches in England some wiggle room. Pitches can be anywhere between 90 and 120 metres long and between 45 and 90 metres wide. I mean, the rules state you can't have a square pitch, but in theory you could have one that's 91 metres long and 90 wide. Imagine rocking up to play a Sunday League game and the pitch is basically a square. So there are rules and regulations on sizes, with a UEFA standard that roughly everyone follows. But as we all know, size doesn't matter, does it?
Welcome everybody to Trans-Europe Express. Back in its normal slot between now and midnight with its normal presenter, me, Danny Kelly, and its normal football brainiac on the other end of the microphone, Andy Brassell. We've got a lot to get through in those 3 hours. All the major stories from across the continent. We'll talk about the World Cup draw, possibly more than just about football. We've got Mbappe Watch, of course, previews for you of many of the big games coming up in the Champions League. Lots of guests too. Eric Bilderman will join us from France to talk about the terrible goings-on surrounding Nice players being apparently assaulted by their own fans. Brian Sciaretta will join us from the US to talk about Miami's triumph in the MLS Cup, another trophy for Lionel Messi. And Tim Vickery, of course, South American football expert, will join us, as he always does, about 11 o'clock. We've got loads to get through. It should be a belter. Thank you for joining us. Welcome one, welcome all to Trans-Europe Express. Good evening, Andy. How are you?
Evening, Danny. I'm well. Yourself?
Very, very good indeed. Later on, we'll hear how Andy added to his reputation as the hardest working man in show business a little later on. We're going to talk about the World Cup draw just a second, Andy. But first, there are big games going on in Spain, Italy and France. None bigger than the game in Italy.
Yeah, that's right. It's now Napoli 1, Juventus 1, an early lead for Napoli in that, created by David Neres, who's on red-hot form at the moment, scored by Rasmus Højlund, who's having a great time since leaving Manchester United. Insert that into, I'm sure, another conversation about another player in about 6 or 12 months' time. We'll see how it goes. The equaliser, though, by Kenan Yildiz, brilliant equaliser by him from an angle, talking of red-hot streaks. It's still 0-0 at the Bernabeu. We're just waiting for the second half to start between Real Madrid and Celta Vigo. Of course, Real Madrid trying to keep pace with Barcelona, who are on great form at the moment. And the game in France is an hour gone in that. It's Lorient 1, Lyon 0. Despite Lyon dominating a lot of the first half, Pablo Pagis, son of Mikhail, with his 5th goal of the season, brilliant finish. What a technician he is. And then Ainsley Maitland-Niles sent off just after that. So Lyon up against it.
Yeah, I know you're going to keep an eye on the latter 2 games. I'll keep an eye on Napoli against Juventus, if it doesn't distract me too much from the main job here on Trans Europe Express, to which you're all very, very welcome. And I'm sure a large number of you will have sat in front of your televisions on Friday watching the draw for the upcoming World Cup in the United States, Mexico and Canada. We will talk about the draw, the actual football, somewhat, and we have months in which to analyse who's going to be playing who and who's going to be playing what and all the rest of it. But I want to talk at first, and forgive me, about the draw itself. I thought it was somewhere between cringeworthy and appalling. I'll be honest with you about that, because I thought it was football was betrayed in some ways, and then, of course, there was also the political aspect to it. Let's start with the football. We saw the complexity that the computer had to deal with of dealing with a 48-team World Cup. Let's ignore the fact that they're already talking positively. Some of the people, I won't call them weasels because it's probably inhumane, who run global football are talking about making the World Cup 64. But even so, 48 teams means that we are going to watch 72 group matches. Bear in mind that the last tournament, which went, to my mind, perfectly satisfactorily in many, many ways, this, controversial location, all the rest of it, the actual football, there were 64 games in the entire tournament before Argentina lifted the famous trophy. This time we're going to watch 72 group games to reduce the field from 48 to 32 teams. It's the lack of jeopardy. It's a terrible idea. And I think, and from that point of view, football itself was the loser. Let's move to the wider. I mean, it means that, these groups, there's so little jeopardy. They've done almost what they've done with the Champions League. Take Scotland's group, Brazil, Morocco, Haiti, some of the great teams in world football, old opponents as well, some old matches made. But it's going to be, unless Scotland are absolutely appalling, they're going to find it very hard not to qualify for the round of 16, or 32 rather. And that's what really bothered me about it. The construction of the tournament suits the television companies, makes more money for FIFA, but is no good for the football tournament itself. The second thing about the World Cup draw was the politics of it. Look, whether or not you think that President Trump is entitled to a peace prize is completely up to you. That's it. That's down to yourself. But what businesses of FIFA to be giving him a peace prize? There are people like the people at Nobel who have been doing this for the past decades and finding deserving and brilliant winners of the Nobel Peace Prize. This looked like it was just blowing smoke up Donald Trump's fundament. That was the tone of a lot of the draw, I thought. Again, you're entitled to your view about Donald Trump, but this is a football draw. It's not supposed to be a rally for who is, in my opinion, a very divisive figure as the President of the United States. Obviously he and Infantino, they were showing off that they are best friends. That in itself is a political statement. And here's the problem. For FIFA now, they have made their own bed of nails, because the next time they start trying to ban a football association because it's in, being guided by their own local governments, they've not got a leg to stand on. They are a political organisation now. The next time they start talking about Palestinian flags in a stadium, Ukrainian flags in a stadium, or whatever political, or gay armbands on the arms of footballers, everybody's perfectly willing to say, but hang on, You are a political organisation now with your obvious backing of a divisive, and again, you're entitled to your opinion about it, President of the United States. I think the whole thing was, as I say, somewhere between cringeworthy and appalling. We will love the football when it starts, but that was a horrible look for the global game, Andy. I've said my piece now.
And we're talking, Danny, it's brilliantly said. And, you know, we're talking about two men leading the draw who would have Russia in the World Cup if they could. So, you know, that says it all, really. Infantino has done nothing to distance himself from Vladimir Putin, with whom he enjoyed a very close relationship during the 2018 World Cup and has continued to do so. I think if we think about 2022 and Messi having the bish put on him when he was receiving the World Cup, perhaps an even more arresting image than that was Vladimir Putin under an umbrella while the France squad and Didier Deschamps and everyone else were getting soaked receiving the trophy in Moscow in 2018. Look, most people who say that sport and politics are separate, what they mean is unless it's my politics. Yep. And this, I think, was a very, very good example of this. If we switch briefly to the football, and I think we do have to do that because the draw was quite interesting, I thought, particularly from a Scotland perspective. I think that group with Brazil, Morocco and Haiti is going to be a very interesting one. And as you say, Scotland have got an enormous chance because of the formatting. I suppose it's a little bit like the Euros post 2016. Lest we forget, Portugal won Euro 2016 whilst finishing third in their group and basically ending that 3-3 draw with Hungary, which was at sort of just the two teams playing it out amongst each other in a 1982 World Cup sort of style. So maybe we'll see some more of that. I guess when we look at the group stage and the effects it might have going deeper into the tournament, I think when you look at the kickoff times for England and Scotland, they've done quite well. Of course, this is mainly propelled by the TV companies. You know, we all think of us being on the same side when it comes to World Cup, but certainly I know from Germany, there was pressure on them to play some early games. So it would be in European prime time, and sure enough, Germany have got a midday kickoff first off. Spain have got two midday kickoffs to start, and Portugal have got two midday kickoffs to start. Now, look, they'll still be able to get through the group. We know that. But that will affect them going deeper into the tournament, I expect. And, you know, we can't know anything really now in terms of workload and how the workload, not just of the World Cup, but of the season building up to that, will affect these teams and will affect the players who are actually able to be there in the condition they're in.
It's also, I was noting that the amount of space involved in the group stages is very interesting. Not just the distances between the venues. I mean, you can't help that. Brazil had a similar issue, that there were vast distances, but also because the number of teams that are playing, some teams you'll have the opening game. I think, is it Mexico and South Africa?
It is, yeah.
And some teams won't play for another 7 days. So there may be a case. I think England are one of those who've got a real long gap between the start of the tournament. They could probably need to put in a friendly somewhere in order to keep the players turned over because of the size of the tournament. There are huge gaps between the games.
Yeah, England have a couple of friendlies in the States before they start, and I think that's the sensible thing to do, really. I mean, a lot of teams' plans were contingent on how the draw went, and I think you could argue in that sense that, you know, much as the draw was the gala event on Friday, the Saturday draw of times and
was more important,
and venues
for sure.
was at least as important. Yeah.
I mean, England's draw, Croatia, we know, are always a problem, though, you know, I will say that, you know, they're aging and moving a long way away from their golden period. But, of course, Modric and Perisic will probably be in there with their 900 caps between them. And although they failed to qualify for the AFCON coming up in Morocco in a few days' time, Andy, Ghana's team at the front has got plenty of problems for England, hasn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I don't think we're talking about a 2006 sort of vintage Ghana here, but Anton Semenyo, of course, taking on England will be really interesting. Although I guess the biggie when we're heading into the Eurozone is Mbappe versus Haaland in the group stage. I mean, that's going to be fascinating. I know you, like I, think Norway are really, really interesting in this World Cup simply because of the best centre-forward in the world that we know on their day. Norway can't win the World Cup, but they can definitely ruin it for someone else.
Yeah, and you know, when the pathways have cleared, I expect Sweden to have qualified as well and have sorted out their forward line. By the time the World Cup comes around, you won't want to be playing them anytime soon either. Listen, the football will be fascinating. We know it will be, because that's what, you know, most of us fell in love with professional football because of a World Cup sooner or later in our lifetimes. I just wanted to make the point that did not look like a good look for the global game for me. We'll talk about the football, no doubt, endlessly between now and the World Cup starting. Our poll tonight is about it as well. Obviously, 4 teams have been seeded, the teams in the different coloured quadrants, and so they're the subject of our poll tonight. Which of those teams is the favourite for the World Cup? France, Argentina, Spain or England? I can hear Tim shouting from Brazil. France, Argentina, Spain or England. It's a Twitter poll, so go to X, at Danny Kelly Words, at Andy Brassell, 2 S's and 2 L's, and of course at talkSPORT. Vote which of those nations is favourite right now for the World Cup next summer. You're listening to Trans Europe Express. We have to move on. There's loads of things to get through. And next we'll be talking about an equally, in some ways, disturbing event with what's been happening with Nice, their players, their ultras, and now the authorities. Eric Bilderman, top French journalist, will join us for that just a few seconds' time here on Trans Europe Express. Yeah, welcome back. Listen, we'll get stuck into the big story coming out of France in just a second. But first, Andy, big goals in two of our games tonight.
Yeah, I've got my eyes on Real Madrid against Celta Vigo. It's 1-0 to Celta. Viliot Svedberg, the young Swedish forward, came on at half-time. Brilliant finish from him. About 12 yards out, flicked it with the outside of his foot into the far corner past Thibaut Courtois. If this were to hold, it would mean Barcelona 4 points in front in La Liga.
Meanwhile, at the top of the table in Italy, Napoli have taken the lead against Juventus. They were leading. Juventus pulled one back, and get your Manchester United fans, including our assistant producer, Haj, put your hands over your ears, because Rasmus Højlund has got a second goal. He's in fantastic form for the Neapolitans. With 12 minutes to go of normal time, it's Napoli 2, Juventus 1 in this game that I think is hugely important towards the top of the very, very tight race for Serie A. Right. Thank you for those, Andy. Let's get back then to what happened in Nice last week, where two of their players were said to have been. I have to couch this in language now because people like the mayor have said nothing happened. Two of their leading players were attacked by ultras back at their training ground. The whole thing is now getting completely out of hand. We're joined now by Eric Bilderman, top French football journalist, to try and get to the bottom of what's going on here. Andy, I'll let you lead this as well because of your knowledge of French football. Good evening, Eric.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us, Eric. Andy, why don't you and Eric make a start with what's going on here?
Well, firstly, Eric, tell us about what has happened for Nice in the last 7 days. It's been a crazy week that's kind of without comparison since they got off the bus at the training ground after that defeat at Lorient last week.
Yeah, so many things have happened. The first thing is that when they came back from Lorient, heading to the training camp to get their car back, they were surrounded by 400 fans of Nice, and when they came off the bus, some people like the manager was not cheered, but he was having a fair talk with the local fans. But then when the players came and Florian Maurice, the sports director, then bitterness came, and there were exchange of nasty words, of spitting, and according to several sources, some players have been physically attacked. Among them, two of them, Murphy and Boga, have went to the police to go on court about that case, and they have a 1 week off duty for medical reason. But it seems that it's more a psychological case than a physical case for these two. So that's what happened on the night of Sunday. Then the manager Frank Hayes, said, if I am the problem, I am okay to go, and I am ready. And he made a very tough interview, attacking the chairman of Nice, attacking Ineos, the owner of the club, and also saying some hard words about the players. So we were all expecting him to leave, and the morning after, he changed his mind and say, I can't go. So rumor says he wanted to go with money, and he didn't want to go without money. That was one of the key points why he was not leaving the club. Of course, Frank Hayes says it's not the case. So that's what happened in the last few days, and then there is more to go ahead, but I prefer not to be too long on that story.
there is so much.
An hour.
There is so much, Eric. I know, but like today, of course, you had the players for the home game against Angers who were obviously supporting their teammates. They were supporting Murphy and Boga. They were wearing their names on the backs of their shirts. They lost their 7th successive defeat, and we'll get to the sporting performance bit and Ineos' role in it in a little bit. But I mean, the atmosphere was absolutely poisonous at the game, wasn't it?
Yeah, commentators presenting first the stadium was half empty. The fans, or I would say the people coming to the games, some of them were absolutely no fans, but just came to boo the players as soon as they got 1-0 down. It was obvious that Nice was playing dreadful football, no physical contact, no speed, nothing like if they were under trauma. But it's too easy to say that they are under trauma because, as you say, it's 7th in a row defeat. And if you look at European Cup games, they have, in the last couple of years, 17 games without a win. 17 games. And
It's amazing.
It's amazing. And they do play, they don't play Man City and they don't play Liverpool. You know, they play in the European League, so it's a nightmare. They are the very, very bottom team in the ranking of the Europa League. So it's too easy to say what happened on Sunday gives an answer of the defeat against Angers. It's one extra, I would say, not bonus, but malus to the team, to the players, to the club, and to the city, because it's a club which is very, very much involved in depth with the city of Nice. Nice is a strong-minded city. What I mean in that, it's a city with a character, but a city where the people, they do have, they're very proud of Nice. The club has a backing of very versatile fans, like a bit they can have in Marseille. They can be very strongly backing the team, but they can also be strongly aggressive against the team.
Volatile, Eric.
Yeah,
volatile fans,
volatile.
Yeah. Listen, Eric, look, the people who abuse the players physically or mentally, that's being investigated. They are responsible for that. That's a given. But what about the atmosphere at the club and the failing off the pitch? Is that all down to Ineos and Jim Radcliffe's decision to put all of his energy, time and money into Manchester United?
I think the club feels very strange in his mood, because they have the feeling that Ineos wants to get rid of them. Even if they do pay the wages, even if the money needed is coming to the club, they feel that nobody at Ineos is caring anymore about Nice, and Nice is for sale. So that's a disgrace for them, because a couple of years ago when Ineos came, it was said that they are going to be the new challenger of Paris Saint-Germain. They are going to be the runner-up maybe of in the French league, and nothing happened. So the mood is very bad, and also the fact that the chairman, who has been named at the club a year and a half ago, is a good economical and financial power man, but he is not good communicators, and he is not a great personality, and he is not somebody when the things goes so bad that you can rely on him to talk, rely on him to be the leading personality of the club. And one very big mistake, which is also very important to mention, is that on the night on Sunday, when the players came by bus to the camp, they knew by the police, they knew by the authorities that there were 400 fans attending them. And the chairman of the club had his car at the airport, and he took his car and went back to his home to have a good sleep. And he didn't came with the players to support them. So I would say that's a heavy mistake.
Listen, Eric, very, very, very good to get your on-the-spot reports about this, because it's a huge story. And, you know, when you hear about booing in stadiums in England, compared to that, of course, it's nothing. We don't have that same ultra culture
Sure.
Thank you very much, Eric Bielderman there, live from France, the latest on the story about Nice, where, as you heard there, two of their best players, Jeremy Boga and particularly Terem Moffi, were off, given a week off work because of what happened. We'll follow that very closely here on Trans-Europe Express. Next, we'll turn to Germany and a much happier story, particularly if you're a supporter of English football. That's coming up next here on Trans-Europe Express. Yeah, let me just remind you that we're now into added on time in that very important game in Naples. It remains Napoli 2, Juventus 1. Welcome back to Trans-Europe Express, where the headline for our talk about what's been happening in Germany is Kane, Kane, Kane again. Because if I told you that Bayern Munich were playing one of the better teams in Germany, Stuttgart, if I told you that Kane got a hat-trick in that game, you'd go, well, that's just business as usual, because in the shadow of Erling Haaland, he is having the most extraordinary season, Harry Kane. What I'll tell you is, though, he came off the bench after about 70 minutes and got those 3 goals. He really is. I mean, as I say, Erling Haaland's form, Andy, is overshadowing what the England captain is doing, but it is quite extraordinary. And then you can tell me that I was amazed to hear that the Bundesliga has also had 13 other occasions where someone has come off the bench and scored a hat-trick.
Yeah, the previous Bayern one being Robert Lewandowski, who was left out of a home game against Wolfsburg by Pep Guardiola and came on at half-time and scored 5 when they were 1-0 down, which was one of those ones where Guardiola was wringing his own face because he was so amazed by it. But 4 Dortmund players amongst those 13. I guess the more recognisable names would be Lewandowski, Miroslav Klose did it for Werder Bremen, and of course, current Premier League player, Florian Wirtz, who in the game that Leverkusen won the title against Werder Bremen, came on as sub at half-time and scored the final 3 in a 5-0 win that saw them over the line for their first ever Bundesliga title. But, I mean, it was a strange game because Stuttgart were in it for the first hour, certainly, but to be able to bring Kane off the bench after an hour, I mean, it's just the ultimate, evilness. It's like an EAFC glitch, isn't it, when you're playing with your mates? It's that kind of thing, really. And Kane, fantastic. But really, for the second week in a row, I would say the player of the game was Michael Olise. He is absolutely walking on water at the moment. And I don't think it's a secret to say that I am one of the judges. There are a huge load of judges in the Guardian Top 100, where they do the Top 100 Footballers of the Year, which comes out at Christmas. And the nominations and all the decisions and the sum up and description of those players is happening at the moment. Michael Olise, if it was down to me, he's just one of the best players in the world. I mean, for me, he would be top 20 on the evidence of this year. He is so good in every single game. He's become that player for France as well. He is the one player, really, that you could say France were missing. And if I were to say I think France have a better chance at the World Cup than I did 16 months ago, Michael Olise is a huge part of that because they had so much going for them already. One of the best goalkeepers in the world in Mike Maignan, one of the best strikers in the world in Kylian Mbappe, who obviously we'll come to later, and he's just put it on the roof of the net. Mbappe almost getting an equaliser for Real Madrid, who are down to 10 men, by the way.
Let me stop you there because the final whistle's gone in Naples, but I believe there's been a red card in Madrid as well.
Yeah, there has. Fran Garcia, the left-back, has been sent off. So Real Madrid trying to get level, just down to 10 men. Mbappe made a great run. He was onside, lobbed it over the on-rushing goalkeeper, just ended up on the roof of the net. Real Madrid still 1-0 down as things stand.
Meanwhile, in Naples, the Diego Maradona Stadium is bathed in the light show after they've won by 2-1. Important game at the top of Serie A, which, as I say, at the moment it's so close that every game is important. They're doing the light show now, and the fans are all holding up their phone lights while the Napoli players gather in the middle of the pitch to take their congratulations. 2 goals for Rasmus Højlund there, with Yildiz, who's in such great form as well, getting the equaliser for Juventus. They thought they might get away with the point, but as I say, Rasmus Højlund, at the moment, I'm not saying he walks on water or anything, but it looks every bit of the player that Manchester United thought they were getting. And as we always say here on Trans Europe Express, and it says it on my T-shirt, just because you failed the Premier League doesn't make you a bad footballer. So Harry Kane, incidentally, when we were doing the quiz beforehand, and I wasn't doing very well at previous German players to come on a sub and get hat-tricks. Of course, I didn't include Miroslav Klose because I loved him. I can't imagine him being on the bench ever, is the problem there, Andy. Meanwhile, then, behind Bayern Munich, the chasing pack, if we might call them that, Leipzig and Dortmund, good results. Leverkusen, not so much.
Yeah, that's right. I suppose if they are a chasing pack, Bayern are on a speedboat and the 3 of them are on a penny farthing each, aren't they, really? That's where we're at.
It reminds me of the commentary, Andy, when Shergar, the great racehorse in the 1980s, the one that went missing, won the Derby. The commentator, whose name escapes me now in the coverage I was watching, went, Shergar, Shergar, Shergar. the others will need a telescope to see him. And I suspect there's a bit of that going on in the Bundesliga.
Yeah, there is, though. Look, Leipzig have been rebuilding, as we know, and they're doing their best. Brilliant performance from them yesterday. They beat Eintracht Frankfurt, who, you know how much I rate them, 6-0 in that game. Eintracht having a bit of a wobble, and certainly some defensive wobbles of late, particularly in the Champions League, of course. Hat-trick in that one, not off the bench, from the start, from Jan Diomande, only 18 years old. And the second
already starting to draw a lot of attention, isn't he?
Yeah, second youngest Bundesliga hat-trick scorer behind Walter Bechtold for Eintracht Frankfurt, funnily enough. That was way back in 1965. So great day for him. Good day for Borussia Dortmund today, who won 2-0 against Hoffenheim. Really, really good performance from them, I thought. But Leverkusen, having knocked Dortmund out of the cup in the week, then went down 2-0 away at Augsburg, which I wasn't expecting at all. Of course, they'd lost in the previous Bundesliga game to Dortmund before they won that cup game against the same opposition. But they played really well in that. They didn't play well at Augsburg this weekend, who parted company with Sandro Wagner this week. So Manuel Baum, who used to be their coach and is now the development director at Augsburg, he's got the 3 games until Christmas, and then they're going to get a new permanent coach. But great result for Augsburg amongst quite a few teams down at the bottom winning this weekend.
And Andy, with my Spurs hat on, I couldn't let you do the German league, the Bundesliga, without mentioning the Nord derby, which doesn't happen very much these days, between Hamburg and Werder Bremen. Well, a really good and tight game, as you'd expect, but also a real moment for fans of Tottenham Hotspur to get their thinking hats on about as well.
Yeah, it was. So this was the first time the Nord Derby had been played in the top flight for 2,843 days. And it is a big rivalry. It really is. Of course, we think of the fact that Hamburg and St. Pauli are a derby, and of course they are, and they're in the same city. But St. Pauli haven't often been at the same level as Hamburg. Hamburg were used to seeing in the top flight, despite the last 7 years before they came back up. And Werder Bremen are as well. So they're more traditional rivals in a certain way. Very keenly contested, very entertaining dust up and handbags at the end after the 3-2 victory for Werder Bremen, sealed by Yusuf Poulsen coming off the bench and scoring a minute after coming on. Great finish from him. But the real goal of the game, and the real man of the season so far for Hamburg, is Luka Vuskovic. Only 18 years old. It's absolutely remarkable. And he scored a back heel that was described on French TV as Zlatan-esque. And I couldn't have put it better myself.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a real big lot of thinking to do here, Spurs. He's on loan, of course. Spurs have 2, let's be honest, brilliant centre-backs. And yet Vuskovic, if Spurs don't offer him, either after January, but more likely next season, lots of minutes, you can see teams like Leipzig and Dortmund just saying, well, we'll have him then, because he's already proven himself to be among the best centre-backs in Germany. It's a big thing for them to do. Now let's get on to our stars of the week, and attention fans of Peterborough United, maybe the first after a decade, the first mention of the posh on Trans Europe Express, because my star of the week is Ricky J. Jones. And I know some of you are certain vintage will think not Ricky Lee Jones, the singer, but Ricky J. Jones, who went in the summer from Peterborough, bless him, to St. Pauli. They were losing 1-0 at Cologne yesterday. And they were looking at 9 losses in a row because they're doing very badly at the moment, St. Pauli. And Ricky got the 93rd minute equaliser to crack that run of defeats. And there's somebody making an impression in one of the top leagues who's come out of the English pyramid. So he's my star of the week. Who is yours, Andy?
Well, we talked about teams at the bottom winning. One of those wasn't Mainz, the other team who got rid of their coach this week. Bo Henriksen, the great Danish coach who did so much for them but couldn't get it right this season. They're glued to the bottom of the table, still glued to the bottom of the table after losing the Friday night game against Borussia Mönchengladbach. And since Eugen Polanski has come in as interim and now permanent coach, they have been doing absolutely brilliantly. 1-0 win for them, despite the fact they've got an absolute raft of injuries at the moment. So a very brave win for them. And Polanski has taken them on to the next level. An almost certain safety. I can say that because there are so many bad teams at the bottom. And I'm talking on a weekend where Heidenheim won their second successive game. So they've moved themselves out of the bottom too. That Mönchengladbach well on their way. By the way, it's all over in France. Lorient 1, Lyon 0. That game was stopped quite a lot because of various fireworks and all the rest of it. Pyro is very much a theme in European football at the moment. Remarkably, Lyon go up a place this weekend due to Rennes losing so heavily at PSG. So Lyon in fifth.
Your anti-Rennes bias shows up every time you mention their name, Andy.
What do you mean? I'm very pleased with them this weekend.
You didn't have to say that. Listen, when we come back, we'll be talking about that win for Naples against Juventus, where it's incredibly tight at the top of the Italian league, and where every result now, and the Christmas trees aren't even up yet, is squeaky bum time. I don't know what the Italian for that is. I don't want to know either. Yeah, the talkSPORT breakfast returns from 6 a.m. tomorrow morning as Chef Stelling and Annie McCoist are joined by a host of guests, including the former England cricketer, the wonderful Mark Butcher, as they look back on what's been a humiliating second test for England in the Ashes. That's breakfast from 6 a.m. tomorrow morning with Chef Stelling and Annie McCoist. So now, Andy, we'll turn our joint attention and our jeweler's eyepiece on what's been going on in Italy. The result tonight, I think, because it is so tight, every single one of these big games between the traditional giants of Italian football is hugely important. The game down there in the south of Italy ended Napoli 2, Juventus 1. David Neres' cross gave Rasmus Højlund his first goal. It looked like Juventus might get out of there with something after an hour when Kenan Yildiz, who's in such fantastic form, what a fine young player he is, got the equaliser. But Højlund again, and he himself is in terrific nick for Napoli, got a winner about 10 minutes from the end. Now, we know that Milan can go top again. They don't play till tomorrow, I think, against Torino.
That's right.
In the meanwhile, though, a very important result, not just for the positive good it's done in Naples, but the setback for Juventus as well.
Yeah, first time Juventus have lost in 6 weeks, 3 successive wins under Spalletti going into this game. And of course, it was another case of Napoli versus Juventus, which has been ultra tense over the last 6 or 7 years. You do remember, of course, the toilet seats that were being sold in Naples, as well as the toilet roll with Gonzalo Higuain's face in. One of the many who've gone from Napoli to Juventus, of course, Maurizio Sarri, who at one point was an absolute hero there, went on to win a title at Juventus in the Cristiano Ronaldo years as well. Spalletti, of course, remember, he got his steering wheel and his CDs that were stolen from him, given back by the Napoli Ultras when he left the club, as they had promised him. They robbed his car, remember, and then said, you'll get these back when you leave the club, because they disliked him so much and they wanted him to leave. But of course, they didn't imagine giving them back in the situation where he left after an argument with De Laurentiis, having won the Serie A title. So I think Spalletti saw the humour in that one. But tonight, I think it was a really deserved win for Napoli. And it's funny, because they've got so many injuries at the moment, Danny, Antonio Conte has stumbled on this front three that really works for him almost by accident.
Neres out of nowhere is suddenly the star man.
Exactly. Setting up the opening goal for Højlund, who's been brilliant as well. Not just with the goals, but I think in the all-round plays, connected so well with the players around him. And Noah Lang, who, if you think a month and a half ago, was stood there complaining to Dutch journalists that, Conte never speaks to me. He's spoken to me once since I've been here. And normally that's only ever going one way. But Antonio Conte took his Zen retreat back in Turin. I don't think many people go to Turin for a Zen retreat. And that really seems to have sorted everything out. So clearly, the less they speak to each other, the better it is for everyone.
Well, I think that's generally true with Antonio Conte, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, let's talk about the game between Inter and Como. I'll let you say the result, but let's be honest. Como have been the tightest defence in Italian football in many ways. They just don't concede goals. But
yeah, before this weekend, Danny, the joint best defensive record in Serie A. So you think they're going to make it tough for Inter. Inter 4, Como 0. And really, this was Inter doing what they do when every couple of weeks they just kind of remind you that they're the best team in the division. We'll look at the table, and as you say, Milan can go top tomorrow. Napoli are top at the moment after that win. I would say if Inter play well or play to their potential, 3 weeks out of 4, they're winning the league. There's no doubt about that, and there's never really been any doubt about that.
You keep saying that, but they're never top, are they?
No, it's true. I went to see them this week, and that they Carabao Cupped it, really.
Let me just introduce this for people.
Please, go on.
Andy, he is the hardest working man in showbiz, and keeps many other top journalists out of work. But your trip to Italy this week, it takes. I just want the listeners to hear this, to know what kind of club that they belong to. I sit here in my Erie and Kilkenny watching dozens of football matches every week on a massive television. You go in person. Tell us about your trip to Italy. Starting, it was 8 o'clock in the morning in London. What else did you do that day?
On Wednesday, yeah. And so I arrived to Bergamo, 3 p.m, Atalanta versus Genoa, 9 p.m, Inter versus Venezia, which I'll touch on a little bit in a second.
Yes.
And after a quick refuel with a pistachio croissant, because you have to when you go anywhere near Milan. I was back in London by 7 a.m. the next morning. So I think don't waste a second. That's what I say. And I didn't waste a second. And
you saw plenty of goals and 2 thrashings.
I did 4-0 to Atalanta against Genoa. Obviously, Daniele De Rossi, the new Genoa coach, looked impeccably cool, nevertheless. I thought Inter's performance against Venezia was really impressive because, of course, Venezia are a second-tier side at the moment, battling for promotion back to the top flight. But Inter, who put out a sort of Carabao Cup half-and-half team, they were so professional, so smart, so economical. They finished their chances so well, and they gave themselves the right to rest by taking it seriously and polishing off Venezia whenever they had the chance. It was really, really impressive. And of course, having not played Lautaro in the week, Marcus Thuram did play and scored 2 goals, including a brilliant diving header and a shot from range. They brought back Lautaro and he absolutely smashed Como.
We'll get on to our stars of the week very soon, Andy, because we're running out of time. But I want to get you to talk very briefly about Fiorentina, because the stats say they're already doomed and it's not even Christmas.
Yeah, they look it, Danny. I mean, you're looking at a team that have not won for their first 14 games. Never before has a team not won in their first 14 games and then managed to stay up. And really, it's been a shambles. So they went down 3-1 at Sassuolo yesterday, having taken the lead from a penalty from Rolando Mandragora. It's not just the fact that they were really comfortably beaten in the end, but there was, before Mandragora took the penalty, it looked like Albert Gudmundsson, the Icelander, would take the penalty. He didn't. And then there was this row between Mandragora and Keane to who would take it, which was diffused by Biraghi, the captain, and Keane was sent away and Mandragora took it and scored. And then there was talk that Albert Gudmundsson had refused to take the penalty. He came out and denied this and said, I am not one of those in the team who would argue in front of a full stadium of fans. Now, obviously, there's one big mistake in that. There's never a full stadium of fans at Sassuolo. But he quickly deleted it from social media, having clearly got the tip from either a director or the press office. But by then, everyone had screenshotted it. And they look an absolute shambles, to the extent that even David De Gea doesn't look himself at the moment.
Well, it's one of Sassuolo's players that is my star of the week in Italy. Christian Volpato. He's 22. He's not a child, but he's still a young player by Italian standards. He's an Italian-Australian. He came out of the Roma Academy and he scored his first goal of the season for Sassuolo. He got another one disallowed and also all around just looked very good. So he's my star of the week in Italy. Why don't you end this hour, Andy, by telling us who yours is?
I'm going to go for Gianluca Gaetano, who scored the winner for Cagliari. Really good finish against Roma, who were down to 10 men at the time. Roma's still in the top 4, but 4 points off the pace now. And 4 points off the pace also Real Madrid. 94th minute, Real Madrid 0, Celta Vigo 2. And it was another goal from Svedberg. He's just got a great pass from Iago Aspas. Absolutely waltzed around Thibaut Courtois, and Real Madrid surely finished.
Huge goal and huge result this, but not just for Real, of course, but for Barcelona at the top of the table. And we'll be talking about Spain very, very soon here on Trans Europe Express.
the Toffees to the Tractor Boys, the Eagles to the Seagulls, Gunners, Bees, Hammers and Magpies, Premier League teams have got a load of crazy nicknames. Ever wondered where they came from? Let's start with Everton. They're dubbed the Toffees, but why? Well, because when the club was formed, just down the road there were two local toffee shops. Ye Ancient Everton Toffee House and Mother Noblet's Toffee Shop were big fan favourites. Next, they say if you can't beat 'em, join 'em, and that's exactly what Ipswich Town did when it came to their nickname. The term Tractor Boys used to be chanted by their opponents as a way of putting the team down for their farming background. But during one game back in the late 90s, Ipswich were 1-0 up and they decided to flip the script. 1-0 to the Tractor Boys, they sang, and a new nickname was born. Let's head to Leicester, famous for more than just a red, well, orangey cheese and Jamie Vardy. Leicestershire's also the birthplace of fox hunting, hence the Foxes. Next up, turns out apples are not the only fruit that don't fall far from the tree. Bournemouth's nickname, the Cherries, comes from the fact the club's stadium was originally built right next to a bunch of cherry orchards. This next story actually involves two club nicknames. It started with Crystal Palace. They were having an absolute nightmare run back in the early 70s. They'd been relegated after a terrible spell and manager Malcolm Allison decided enough was enough. He wanted a new nickname, something strong, fast and destined for success. Something exactly like an eagle. But there's more to this one. Brighton were in search of a nickname too, and Palace finally gave them what they needed. In a heated match between the two back in 1976, Palace fans began chanting, "Eagles, Eagles," and some clever Brighton fans came up with the perfect reply, "Seagulls, Seagulls." Not all club nicknames have a crazy story though. Take the Gunners. That just comes from the fact a group of munitions workers in the Royal Arsenal factory in Woolwich set up the club in 1886. On the flip side, some nicknames seem simple, but there's a bit more to them, like West Ham. The Hammers is actually nothing to do with the ham part of the name. It comes from the fact the club used to be called Thames Ironworks FC and was made up of workmen and shipbuilders. So next time the away end's chanting their crazy nickname, you'll now know exactly where it came from.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the second part of 3 of tonight's edition of Trans Europe Express. We're with you through till midnight. I'm Danny Kelly. Andy Brassell is here with me as well. Tons to get through on it. We've already had 2 very important results out there in Europe. And with all due respect to Lyon losing at Lorient, with Napoli beating Juventus and Real Madrid losing at home to Celta Vigo. Spanish football will be one of the things we talk about during this hour. So will the Champions League. Again, massive representation by English clubs in that, and from 10:30 till 11 we'll be looking at a whole raft of big games, many of them which you'll hear live here on talkSPORT, the network that is your home of live football. So me, Andy Brassell, and you the listening millions, thank you very much. Welcome back to Trans Europe Express, where it's now time for this.
Carrière le Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappé! Mbappé! Little give and go, Mbappe's in! Oh, it's 2-2! He scored twice in 2 minutes! Tête de Kylian Mbappé. Allez, Kylian!
Yeah, well, often we use Mbappe watch as an excuse to talk about Real Madrid and what they're up to, rather than Kylian himself. But we'll talk about Kylian a little later. But Andy, maybe I'm naive, but I think this is a bolt from the blue. This result, and in a week, and we're going to talk about Barcelona in about 10 minutes' time, when they've had a fantastic week, and their coach in particular has showed exactly what he's made of. This home defeat, just confirmed in the last 2 minutes for Real Madrid, is a massive setback. Yeah, and it puts Xabi Alonso under massive pressure. So I think we can talk about statistically the way they're in second place, 4 points behind Barcelona after, as you say, a hell of a week for Barcelona. But the performance really, I think, was a distillation of everything that people around Real Madrid have been worried about in recent weeks. Where's the style? Where's the flow? Where's the plan? I mean, Real Madrid had 23 shots, but it didn't feel to me like Ionut Radu had to have an outstanding game. And it felt to me as if Celta, who are very, very smartly coached by Claudio Giraldez, who, as you know, is one of my favourites. Yeah. They haven't played brilliantly this season, Celta, but they picked them off, I think, quite easily in the second half. Williot Svedberg, who was a substitution at half-time, played really well, opened the scoring with a smart finish from a Brian Zaragoza delivery. And then I've just seen a couple of replays, as I was describing before, the lovely pass through by Iago Aspas, the very experienced Iago Aspas, and then Svedberg kind of wanders round Courtois and just walks the ball in, basically. It's a no-look pass by Iago Aspas, so it's just that little bit better. But funnily enough, on a night where Kylian Mbappe, as we're going to talk about, is chasing a record as 2025 comes to a close, he had a couple of chances, but not a ton of them. Real Madrid looking very far from fluent. But I'm glad you mentioned that he had a couple of chances and take them, because, and this is almost impossible to believe, because we are used to hearing so much, if not negative, but kind of questioning narrative surrounding Kylian Mbappe, but also because of the things that Cristiano Ronaldo achieved at Real Madrid. But with 3 weeks of the year still to go, there's still an outside chance that Mbappe is going to outscore his illustrious predecessor in the calendar year. Well, you could argue more than an outside chance. Cristiano Ronaldo's high watermark was 2013. He scored 59 Real Madrid goals in that season. Mbappe's at 55, so just 4 behind. So 4 from matching him, 5 from bettering him, and he's still got 3 games to go after this one tonight. Now, clearly, he could have done with a goal tonight, but I guess this is Real Madrid and Kylian Mbappe in a nutshell, really. The fact that since he's been there, I guess the feeling around him is so different to the feeling last year, where you think of him missing that penalty at Anfield, missing the penalty at Athletic, and of course he slayed that ghost they went away to Athletic midweek. He scored 2 goals. He was brilliant. Eduardo Camavinga also scored in that goal, a 3-0 win that was an absolute breeze. But I guess that the numbers have been pretty good all the way. But he won't want to be the guy who got good numbers at Real Madrid. He will want to be the guy who won trophies at Real Madrid, and that at the moment is what the question mark is, and that's why there's this question mark over Xabi Alonso. Can he impose himself on a club that's really got such an embedded, such a deep-seated tradition of superstars? You can't manage Real Madrid and it is managing, it's not just coaching. Can you manage Real Madrid in the same way that you can manage anyone else? Look, he would have gone on with his eyes open. He was a player there. He knows. Sure. But, he also, theory and practice are 2 different things. So what he's done before at Real Sociedad's B team and at Bayer Leverkusen could not be more different from what he's required to do at Real Madrid. You can have the best tactical plan in the world, and that's maybe, 15% of what you need at Real Madrid. It's something totally different. And I think as time goes by, Danny, it's not becoming more star-led, it's less star-led, it's becoming more star-led, because you look at not just the stars that are there, but the amount of management and PR and all this sort of stuff they have attached to them. You've taken the words right out of my mouth. There was a time when Real Madrid would have to deal with the Real Madrid manager with the strength in the dressing room of, say, Iker Casillas or Raúl when he was the star man there. But these were top professionals and Real Madrid legends. Now you're dealing with global brands.
Yes,
and they come with their own machine, if you like, that the manager has somehow to negotiate. That's why I always thought in recent times that Ancelotti was the perfect manager for them, because he just seems to he always pours oil on troubled waters. Some of the people who've had the job in recent times just don't recognise the water as being problematic. Listen, we'll get on to Kylian's next chance to add to that goal tally, which, of course, is mind-boggling in a little while. But first, we should mention that Trent Alexander-Arnold, having finally fought his way into the team, after injury, of course, is now, again, it's my pet peeve in football, talented players being injured because it's just a waste of talent, whether I support them or not. But he's out for another 2 months. Horrible.
Yeah, a real blow, especially as he'd been really good. You know, he'd started 5 successive games. You look at the way he played in that game at Athletic in the week, where he set up the first for Kylian Mbappe. He was involved in the second one. It was his cross knocked back by Mbappe for Camavinga to score the second. And then 10 minutes after half-time, he pulls up. He needs to be helped from the pitch, which is never a great sign. And yeah, 2 months out with a thigh injury. So he's had some really, really unfortunate luck so far. This is bad for Real Madrid and bad for Xabi Alonso as well, not just because Alexander-Arnold had been providing them with something really important, but the fact that at the moment, Dani Carvajal, he's still out. He was there in his civvies tonight. And during the game tonight, another blow is Eden Militao limped off as well. So a huge problem for them.
They're getting back to last year's problems. They're running out of defenders really quickly, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And that's a big problem ahead of facing Manchester City in the week.
Well, I was going to say, that's the next opportunity for Kylian Mbappe to add to his, did you say 55 goals in the calendar year so far for Real Madrid? They take on a Manchester City side who may not be quite the powerhouse they were in the last few years, but if you look at the quality of the goals they got this weekend in the Premier League, they will be a problem for Real Madrid. The game, of course, is in the Bernabeu.
Yeah, and I think the especially bad news for Real Madrid is the result that City had last time out, because if they'd have beaten Leverkusen, as we all expected them to do, and who knows, maybe they would have if Pep Guardiola had picked a slightly different team. You've got to rest players somewhere. We understand that. But now it feels that there's really a pressure on Manchester City to come to the Bernabeu and get something. And Real Madrid are an opponent that, despite the elimination of 2024, they seem to have got a grip of, I think, in the last couple of years. So, as you say, Manchester City, not quite the Manchester City we've been used to in the last 4 or 5 years, but more than capable of making it difficult for Real Madrid, and more than capable of making it difficult for the Real Madrid that are Real Madrid at the moment. Because, you know, one win in 5 league games is not great.
No, and you know, they've got bits and pieces. Vinicius letting out things last week about his relationship with the manager. Rodrigo apparently heading for the exit door, at least on loan in January. You know, but there's always drama surrounding Real Madrid. That's why we cover them in such detail. But it's not quite. How can I put this? Look, they might beat Manchester City handily. That's the kind of team they are, particularly in Europe. But it's not quite right there at Real Madrid this season so far.
No, it's not.
Yeah, Xabi Alonso, despite being adored during his time there at Madrid, very soon people will start saying, well, hang on, what's happening here? Though I don't see an obvious candidate to replace him, Andy. There's going to be a lot of really good managers on the market after the World Cup in North America and Mexico, because there are some huge names who will come to the end of their contracts, including Thomas Tuchel, of course. But at the moment, Xavi, I don't see an obvious candidate to replace him, but maybe I'm not looking in the right places. So, Real Madrid, by their own standards, in a little bit of a trough, exacerbated by that defeat at home to Celta Vigo tonight. Next up, we'll look at Spain, where Madrid's struggles are being thrown into relief by the weeks that Barcelona are having as their team, much doubted by me at the start of the season, starts to really gel and motor. That's next here on Trans Europe Express. Yeah, we talked a few minutes ago about Real Madrid's stumble tonight, and there's some of their injury problems as well, and the difficulty of managing what is in fact a group of international institutions rather than a pool of players. All of that, as I said, as we now turn our attention to Spain, exacerbated, Andy, by Barcelona's brilliant week, and they're really rounding into something like the form that they will have hoped to have been heading at this stage. Of course, the stadium is coming online. Headline is Barcelona go big. In a week, Andy, when they scored a lot of goals against some decent teams, and Hansi Flick, in contrast to Xavi Alonso's struggles, has showed just why he is so highly regarded as a football manager.
Exactly, Danny, and I think it shows you how much football can change in a week, because remember last week we were talking about Hansi Flick being comforted on the bench by Rafinha. He was looking all teary, and there was the question of whether the pressure was really getting to him. The level of performance of his team in that win they scratched out against Alaves really getting to him, as well as there being a couple of other issues. He was upset after his assistant Marcus Sorg was sent off. But what they've done in terms of response this week, and what Flick has done in terms of response this week, has been brilliant. As you say, on Tuesday, 3-1 win against Atletico at Camp Nou, in which they were excellent after a sleepy kind of first 20 minutes and going a goal down in that. And then again, they went a goal down yesterday at Betis, ended up winning 5-3. They were 5-1 up at one point, and this was with the resurgent Rafinha and Lewandowski as unused subs on the bench. Hat-trick from Ferran Torres in this, who again really coming through for them. Rooney Bargi, of course, the young Swede on the right hand side with his left foot, scoring his first league goal for the club. He was great as well, and he was there because Lamine Yamal was at number 10. And there are a couple of things that have crystallised this week when we think of what makes Hansi Flick such a great coach. It's not just the aggression of his team, it's the fact that he is able to not just persuade players to play in positions that are other than their own, but get them to flourish in those positions. So this week we've seen Barcelona have had their defensive problems in recent weeks. So Gerard Martin, the reserve left back, moved to centre back, has played really well in both of those games, despite them conceding a couple of goals at the end of that game yesterday. And Lamine Yamal, interestingly, with Rooney on the right-hand side at Betis, playing in the 10, and he was able to cause all sorts of problems for Betis, as you might expect, but again, playing out of his natural position. And he can make this happen time after time. You think of Alaba, you think of Alphonso Davies at Bayern Munich, players who really had career-defining position changes. And it's Flick doing his magic all over again.
Meanwhile, we might contrast their fortunes with those of Atletico Madrid. Now, you mentioned on Tuesday that Atletico got beaten 3-1 by Barcelona. That could happen to anybody, but they had taken the lead there. So in the early stages of Tuesday evening's games, they were top of La Liga. By this evening, they're 9 points off the lead because they've had 1.5 disastrous performances and disastrous results since that early lead they took against Barcelona in midweek.
Yeah, and you know what? They missed big chances in that game against Barcelona. Now, when they fell 6 points behind after that Barcelona game, you thought, okay, well, their title tilt is not looking great at the moment. It's still a relatively early point of the season. Alex Baena, who scored the goal in that game against Barcelona, he said, well, look, you know, Atletico were top if you go back around this time a year ago and didn't go on to win La Liga. So it shows that it's not done. And you think that's fine. And as you say, Danny, you can lose to Barcelona. But was always going to be about how did they react to that defeat, because that was their problem really last season, losing big games and then having quite a bad hangover off the back of it. Of course, you think of the Real Madrid game where they lost in penalties, and the Champions League as being the most obvious example of that. So they're going to Athletic, especially after Barcelona had already won yesterday, and an Athletic which is a team that they've always had problems with over the last couple of seasons, but Athletic who've not really been athletic this season, even at San Mamés. You know, some average teams have taken points from them at San Mamés this season, and Atletico really weren't aggressive enough, really didn't create anything, and were really quite flat. And it all turned really in the last 10 minutes. Alex Sorloth had a header, a great chance to give them the lead with about 6 minutes to go. A pretty easy save in the end for Unai Simon. 20 seconds later, it was in the back of their net with Alex Berenguer scoring his first of the season. A brilliant finish and a really deserved win for Athletic. So you just have to wonder with Athletic after this week, you're just asking again, have they got the chops to make a proper go of this?
I know, and when you see the kind of players, including Conor Gallagher, that they're talking about, if you read the transfer tittle-tattle, letting go, you wonder what is the direction this team wants to take. It's just not settled enough for a Simeone team to be doing their very best work. But if that's one end of the spectrum, Andy, let's talk about the other. Valencia played Seville today. Now, you don't have to be 1,000 years of age to remember when both these teams were really, really good. Indeed, they were European powers. Those days are long behind us at the moment.
Yeah, so we're talking about 15th plays 13th at the moment. And it was a game of decent atmosphere, as it always is at the Mestalla, but such poor quality. It took an own goal for Sevilla to take the lead, and they celebrated it like they'd scored in the World Cup final. And then a late goal from one of this show's favourites, Hugo Duro, to squirrel a point for Valencia. Actually, Lagi Ramzani, who's on loan to Valencia from Leeds, he came on as substitute in the second half and made a real difference for Valencia, I thought. But then again, that's where they're at in terms of talent, in terms of squad at the moment. Now, there's enough rot down there that they'll probably both get away with it. But after Sevilla's decent start to the season and that victory over Barcelona that we all remember, I think their ceiling was somewhat exaggerated in some quarters. They are around Valencia. They are where they should be, really, in the bottom third of the table. And given that this was the Europa League semi-final, as you say, in 2014, it's really quite sad.
Yeah, and that league is so dominated by two teams, with all due respect to Atletico. We see the starving of these brilliant clubs of funds because of the way their television deals work. Sooner or later, unless they get a sugar daddy, and I'm not sure what the Spanish sugar daddy is, they're all just trying to compete in this league, eventually exhaust people's funds and patience, and you see great clubs like Valencia and Sevilla starting to struggle. Who's your star of the week in Spain?
In both of those cases, I do have to say it's plain managerial incompetence on every level, which is very sad.
That's perfectly a good thing to say, Andy, because it's such. All right, I'll rephrase it. Such is the pressure caused by the top two teams and the amount of money they take out of the system. That if you are anything less than managed very well, you're going to struggle.
Yeah, that's very true. And who are managed very well? My star of the week is Jorge Mikatadze from Villarreal. Villarreal, who, bear in mind, are 5 off the top with a game in hand. So third behind Real Madrid, but in a terrific position. And they won 2-0 against Getafe, which is... Well, playing Getafe is like a visit to the dentist, isn't it? You just want to get the right result and you don't really matter how it happens as long as it's over as quickly as possible. Mikatadze got the second goal in that beautiful lobbed finish, his 4th goal in just 6 starts so far. And that's the thing. Once he really starts to hit it, then there'll be a way.
Okay, well, my star of the week is someone you'd be forgiven for thinking has disappeared into the weeds. Rafa Mir was once a really good striker for the aforementioned Seville, perhaps back in their golden period. These days he's at Elche. And they beat Girona by 3-0. Rafa got 2 of those, taking him to that's 6 in his last 12 games. And if he, perhaps in the late autumn of his career, is overachieving, the goals he's getting are allowing Elche to do exactly the same. They are far exceeding expectations, largely on the back of the goals from Rafa Mir, who is my star of the week. Next up, we'll be turning our gaze, if you like, onto the Champions League. First up, we'll look at the fixtures we talked about Manchester City already, the 5 remaining English clubs in this huge league that we have these days. And then we'll turn to the 10:45 to some very, very big games out with those English teams. We'll talk about Barcelona's game against Eintracht Frankfurt and much else besides as they return in the Champions League for the first time in 3 years to the new camp. That's all coming up over the next 30 minutes here on Trans-Europe Express. Yeah, talkSPORT's teamed up with the Pitch Experiences to bring you the all-out VIP experience at the PDC World Darts Championship at Alexandra Palace on the 23rd of December. You and 3 mates could be living it large with platinum seats, fine dining, a complimentary bar and exclusive access to the 501 lounge with Russ the Voice Bray. Then it's straight to your prime table for the best view in the house as the darts drama unfolds in front of you. Get ready for an unforgettable Ali Pali Christmas. Here's how to enter. For your chance to win, just text DARTS to 83338. Text costs £2 plus your standard network rate, or you can call 03432 17508. Lines close at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the 18th of December. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. It's 18 plus and UK residents only. So for your chance to win, do it now. Text DARTS to 83338. And this is a network promotion. Full T's and C's are at talksport.com. Which takes us, Andy, to this midweek's fixtures in the Champions League. We'll talk about the English clubs first, and we've already talked about Manchester City who go to Real Madrid. I mean, that game could go either way. The other one, next one, talk about, and so I'll give you a list of all the games that are live here on talkSPORT Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, in a while. Liverpool, in the kind of form they're in and the kind of mood they're in, with the hand grenade thrown into the normally calm mill pond of their club by Mohamed Salah, the last place they want to go, I guess, is Inter Milan.
Yeah, that's right. And remember, Inter, with a really largely reserve side, beat Arsenal at this stage last year. So we know they're not scared of English teams like a lot of opposition seems to be. Now, look, as I said, Inter manage their resources really, really well over the last couple of weeks between Coppa Italia and Serie A. They were unbelievable at the weekend. I feel like they're playing really well at the moment, no matter who wears the shirt. They've got a better squad than they did last season. I think you look at Francesco Pio Esposito, the young striker who initially emerged during the Club World Cup and has been really good this season, broken into the Italy team. He's useful to them. Angio and Boni is very useful to them. Of course, scored the final goal in that win over Venezia in the Coppa Italia. And this is all behind the best striking partnership really in the world in Thuram and Lautaro. So they feel to have got a little bit younger in the right places as well. So maybe weariness won't be as much of an issue as it will last season. I mean, the depth that they had on paper was not depth in reality last season, it turned out. So it feels like they're a little better equipped. They're difficult to score against. And I guess the big question is, does Mohamed Salah take the flight or not?
Well, it's for a club that prides itself on its privacy of its relationships between fans, administrators, managers, and players. Very, very unusual outburst by the great Egyptian. Let's talk then about, you've already seen Atalanta play in the last few days. They're home to a Chelsea team who I think their result at Leeds was a real shocker to them, but have been doing okay in Europe so far.
Yeah, they have. And where this is quite a crucial one, though, is because this is getting into the final third. So this is the sixth game of 8, of course, coming up. And Atalanta and Chelsea, despite a few little faux pas by Atalanta, and despite that excellent result for Chelsea against Barcelona last time out, they're on equal points. So really, this is something... It's a big game for Chelsea, I think, trying to get through to the back end of the Champions League and making sure they're in that top 8, which clearly has to be their aim with the quality they've got. Atalanta were very good in the week when I saw them. Not so good yesterday as they lost 3-1 at Verona, with a lot of the big guns coming back that have been rested in the week, including Ademola Lookman and... Lazar Samadžić as well. So I think if there's anything that gives Atalanta a bit of a lift, it's the fact that Rafael Palladino, their new coach, absolutely tore them out for their performance yesterday and said, look, a couple of things from the referee went against us, but that just wasn't good enough. And I expect a lot better. So you would expect them to really come out the traps against Chelsea. I think it'll be a really interesting game. And I think when you look at it, and when you look at the table, as you say, the one big table, Danny, there are, especially with the results of the last match day where we saw 3 English sides get turned over, which is quite unusual. There are English teams that need points this time.
I was about to say...
Interesting. Liverpool being one of those, of course.
Yeah, and another one is Newcastle, because you're right, the tournament takes a different tone when you get into these last 3 games. And for Newcastle, having lost in the south of France, their visit to Leverkusen is where the road really hits the rubber now.
Yeah, and with that Manchester City loss to Leverkusen, Newcastle are only a point in front of Leverkusen. So Newcastle are another one of those. When you look at the fixture list, they have to be looking at the top 8. There's no doubt about that. And what's happened to Leverkusen in the last week with that those 2 successive league defeats, the one to Dortmund, which in my opinion they didn't deserve to lose, and the one against Augsburg yesterday, which they definitely did. has left them in a position where I think we can recognise the good job that Kasper Hjulmand has done, taking over after 2 league games with a squad of strangers, really. That they've managed to be anywhere near functional is a real, I think, testament to how well he's done and how well the club in general is managed. But you do tend to think when they're facing an opponent of real quality who are really on it, if Newcastle can grab a spell of momentum, they can definitely go and win this. But I guess again, you wonder if what happened yesterday to Leverkusen is a little bit of a wake up for them, like it might be for Atalanta.
Yeah, we'll get on to Arsenal in a minute, but the other English club that definitely needs to win their game is Spurs, because their last 2 games are against teams from the upper end of the Bundesliga. So Slavia Prague looks like a winnable game in North London on paper, though Tottenham's home record is, well, in the league at least, despite the recent victory against Brentford, terrible. I wonder, Andy, whether it's starting to dawn on Thomas Frank that he needs to rely more on his young players, with Archie Gray and Xavi Simons being so good at the weekend.
Yeah, I think that probably is the case. And I think when you look at how they will aim to, or how they should aim to beat Slavia Prague, who, by the way, are unbeaten in the league this season and top of the Czech league.
Not mugs at all, no.
No, and I think we can see they're not mugs from the fact that, they're probably not going to make the top 24. But they've got points out of 3 of their 5 games against good opposition as well. The only teams who've beaten them are Inter and Arsenal, who are going to beat you because they're really good on in both of those cases. They managed to keep clean sheets against Athletic and Atalanta, which is pretty impressive, I would say. So Spurs need to show the craft that they've sometimes lacked, especially in home games. So again, Xavi Simons taken off this weekend. That is absolutely key for them, because Xavi Simons playing well makes a massive difference to what Spurs are capable of between now and Christmas.
Yeah, and I understand why Thomas Frank has been reluctant with him, and he very pointedly said he's been working really hard in training and in the gym. But if Spurs can get Simons motoring, then a lot of other things fall into place very, very quickly. The last of the English teams that we haven't spoken about yet, Arsenal. But I mean, I don't think they won't have been very happy with losing at the weekend, but sometimes breaking a long unbeaten run is good, because you start to defend the unbeaten run rather than play the moment. They go to Club Brugge, and Brugge are one of those, no one expects them to be challengers for the Champions League, but they have shown that they are capable of big results.
Yeah, they are capable of big results, capable of reaching the knockouts, of course. Got themselves in the last 16, beat Atalanta to get in the last 16 in the playoff last season. But they're having a little bit of a wobble at the moment. If there's a time to play Club Brugge, if there's a good time to play Club Brugge, this is it. They went down 3-2 at St Truiden this weekend, and they've lost 3 of the last 4 in the league. So Union Saint-Gilloise have extended their lead at the top without really being on top form themselves domestically. So yeah, we know there's young talent and experience there, but yeah, great moment for Arsenal to go and face them.
Let me just tell you about the plethora, that's the correct word, of matches we've got for you from Europe on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday here on the talkSPORT network. Open up your ears, because you'll want to hear these games. The early kick-off on talkSPORT 2 on Tuesday is Bayern Munich against Sporting Lisbon. We'll be previewing that in a few minutes' time. Then at 8 o'clock, we've got 2 games for you. Over on talkSPORT 2, it's that game between Spurs and Slavia Prague. While here on talkSPORT, the huge match between Inter Milan and Liverpool will be your commentary. Move on then till Wednesday. Again, 8 o'clock kickoffs on both talkSPORT channels. On talkSPORT 2, it's Brugge against Arsenal. And then here on talkSPORT, Newcastle really probably have to get something from their visit to Leverkusen. You can hear full commentary of that. Then on Thursday, the early kickoff, that is 5:45, between Utrecht and Nottingham Forest in the Europa League, is over on talkSPORT 2. And then we've got 2 8 o'clock kickoffs for you in the Europa League. Basel against Aston Villa will be here on talkSPORT. And then another game here in Ireland. 8 o'clock, talkSPORT 2, Shelbourne in Dublin take on Crystal Palace in the Conference League. Kevin Hatchard, our great friend on Trans Europe Express, will be the commentator for that as we bring you match after match after match in Europe here on talkSPORT, your home of live football. Next up, we'll look at some more of these games, the ones that don't involve English teams. Yeah, I told you there about all the big commentaries you can hear on talkSPORT and talkSPORT 2 over the next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Staying with the Champions League, Andy, the game between Barcelona and Eintracht Frankfurt is a very important game culturally, because it marks the return of Barcelona to the newly refurbished, and it looks pretty amazing from what I've seen, Nou Camp. But in a more prosaic world of actual needing results, this is a game Barcelona have to win.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's quite interesting when you look at the way that the big clubs have approached, or the biggest clubs have approached the Champions League group stage, league stage this year, in that they were almost caught a little bit unawares last year, that they didn't know what the total was that you'd need to get yourself into the top 8 and into the top 24. And so you had teams like PSG, the eventual winners, Real Madrid, Manchester City, who obviously had different problems, sort of fumbling around for points towards the end of the league stage. And a lot of them, like PSG, have come out the traps this season and said, right, we're not leaving anything to chance. And so you have PSG getting, as we've spoken about before, 5 against Spurs, 7 against Leverkusen, 4 against Atalanta. And then on the other hand, you've got the teams who were the best 2 teams in last year's league stage, Barcelona and Liverpool, not looking anything like themselves, almost thinking, are we going to waste good performances in this? And now they're leaving a little bit to chance. Now, of course, this is different because in a very unusual move in UEFA club competition, as you say, Barcelona are going back to Camp Nou. Now, there was always a question whether UEFA would allow them to do this. They generally don't like teams. They can move mid-season, but they don't like them to move mid-phase, if you like. So
yes,
when you look at Spurs, when you in 2019, when you look at Porto in 2004, they moved between group stage and
to be fair to UEFA, a phrase I've used very little in my career. To be fair to UEFA, the change in the format means that the stadium's ready. It's still got games to play. It's not like the group stages of 4. They were such integral little leagues. You needed them to be absolutely the same playing field. Whole different thing now with this changed format. I'm not saying the format's better or worse, but it does take some of the saltiness out of a decision that other clubs might feel they wouldn't have got from UEFA.
That's true, and I think also in terms of if we're looking at the raw numbers with Barcelona, they were great at Montjuic and they'll continue to be great at Camp Nou. So I'm not sure if it makes a massive difference to visitors. And of course, the fact that going back to the Star Wars language, you were talking about Kevin Hatchard in the last part, it's not yet fully operational, the old Camp Nou, is it? So I think we've got to bear that in mind. The other thing that we have to bear in mind is going back a couple of years when Eintracht were winners of the Europa League. One of the key games in that is they won 3-2 away at Barcelona at the Camp Nou, where Eintracht Frankfurt fans bought the tickets off locals and staged a complete takeover of the Camp Nou, after which Joan Laporta completely blew his top and changed the whole ticketing protocol for cup games at Camp Nou. So you would expect a lot of Eintracht Frankfurt fans, but not quite as many as last time, that game that Eintracht won 3-2, of course.
Yeah, we know your love of Portuguese football, Andy. And while Benfica have made a really poor start to the Champions League, you can't say the same of Sporting, who perhaps surprisingly find themselves in the top 8. They've got a big task during the week, though. They go to Munich.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. But I think when you look at the table so far, it's quite interesting because Sporting are in the top 8. And they've almost crept in there by stealth, and they've done good things. I think if you look at the one game they lost, actually, out of the 5, they've won 3, drawn 1 and lost 1. They were really unlucky to lose at Napoli, I thought. So we could be talking about a team that's unbeaten. And I think you look at them at the start of the season, the first full season post Ruben Amorim, of course, post Victor Gyökeres, after he moved on to Arsenal. I think a lot of people are expecting them to slink back into the shadows. What I think is so impressive about Sporting in the Champions League this season under Rui Borges, like that they're competitive in a Portuguese league context, is not massively surprising to me, because I think they had the foundations to carry on and they had the players to carry on. And we know that they continue to play good football and be aggressive domestically. But the fact is that they can do things like they do away at Napoli, where they run them close, away at Juventus, where they went and got a draw, where they started really strongly and then defended really well. The fact that they can... I think what separates the men from the boys in these below elite clubs is the ones that can change from being incredibly dominant domestically to saying, okay, we're going to be without the ball and we can completely deal with that. That shows the teams, I think, that are really mentally strong and are really well coached. And if they've got half a chance, it's because of that.
Yeah, teams go from 70% possession in domestic football to 30% in the Champions League. Yeah. Listen, Benfica, who've started very poorly, they're at home to Napoli. Benfica probably won't make the top 8. They're struggling at the moment to make the top 24, but they can, with Jose Mourinho's guidance, they can really deal a body blow to Napoli.
Yeah, Napoli, who are 20th at the moment, so not in a great position themselves. And you know how I said repeatedly last season when I was trying to describe how good Liverpool were at this stage, that the results don't fully explain how good they've been.
Yes.
I think, on the contrary, the results that Napoli have got, which have been rather underwhelming, haven't underlined quite how bad they've been. Like I said, they were lucky to crawl over the line against Sporting. Not great against Qarabag for the first hour either, I thought. And we're not talking about, with respect to those two teams, absolute giants of the competition. So I think they've got a lot to do. I think that Benfica have got the scent of blood. They're playing better in recent weeks. it feels as if that win at Ajax, even though obviously Ajax are terrible, has given them a bit of a lifeline in this Champions League. They went, they played well, they got the result that they needed. They didn't let their nerves get the better of them against an inferior team. And Mourinho will be absolutely loving this, that he can big up the underdogness of, and I mean, obviously it's scandalous really, sort of sitting there being Benfica coach and going, we're the underdogs in our massive stadium that's got 65,000 people in it. It's kind of cheeky, but that's his thing, of course. I think they can make it really, really difficult for Napoli. And of course, we know that it's going to be so fascinating, Mourinho against Conte, because Conte really, really struggles in this competition.
Then let's talk about the game between Monaco and Galatasaray. I put the mockers on Gala by saying, Turkish teams, they've not yet reflected their power in the world game and the kind of players they collect together in the Champions League. Galatasaray had a home tie. Welcome to hell, all the rest of it. They blew that, Andy, and now they need to go to Monaco and get something if they're not to confine themselves almost certainly to the punishment round.
Yes, and Galatasaray are really interesting, I think, for the rest of this, because they've got this game at Monaco, who aren't a great Monaco side, I think it's fair to say. And then they've got this home game against Atletico Madrid, who are a bit rubbish on the road, but are going to need points. I think it's fair to say from this, before they go to Manchester City in the last game. And, if Pep Guardiola gets it right, City will be home and hosed for that last game. So Galatasaray, as on so many other occasions in Europe, will be playing against themselves, which will be interesting. You look at Monaco, and they're in a really bad state at the moment. Of course, got some brief respite from beating PSG.
We said it before, replacing Marseille as the crisis club on the south of France.
Yeah, that's right. Despite the limited volatility of having 12,000 people in the ground who don't really care about football, but I think it's interesting because they went and lost 1-0 at Brest on Friday night, having basically asked for an extra day from the league so they could prepare themselves for this. They've basically just got an extra day to feel bad about themselves before they play Galatasaray. You always see a lot of Galatasaray fans at these away spots, normally in Germany. I wonder how many are going to get into the Stade Louis II.
Yeah, I think it could be a lot, as the saying go. That's not a mathematical equation, but it's a prediction there will be a lot of them. Andy, we've got about a minute to discuss. The interesting thing about this format that they've introduced is that this is the moment I sensed last season with 3 games to go when people really had to start saying, right, the talk is over here now, chaps. We got to do this now, and that's certainly true for Barcelona, for Spurs, for Liverpool, for Newcastle. It's not now or never. But if you lose this midweek, you're putting almost intolerable pressure on the last 2 games.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Danny. But it is funny looking at the table at the moment, looking at Barcelona below Leverkusen and Tottenham. Look, I have every confidence that they'll beat Eintracht Frankfurt, especially with how leaky Frankfurt have been in recent weeks. But we talked about playing against yourselves. It is a test of nerve at this point, isn't it?
It is, and there's some fantastic ties. And as I told you, you can on Wednesday, Tuesday and Wednesday, you can hear the games in Munich, Milan, Tottenham, Leverkusen, and Bruges against Sporting Lisbon, Liverpool, Slavia Prague, Newcastle and Arsenal respectively. They're all on talkSPORT and talkSPORT 2, your home of live football, where Andy and I will be rushing through the next hour because there's so much to talk about here on Trans Europe Express, and that will include going over to South America to hear from Tim Vickery. Thank you for listening to us, and don't go anywhere else.
the Toffees to the Tractor Boys, the Eagles to the Seagulls, Gunners, Bees, Hammers and Magpies, Premier League teams have got a load of crazy nicknames. Ever wondered where they came from? Let's start with Everton. They're dubbed the Toffees, but why? Well, because when the club was formed, just down the road there were two local toffee shops. Ye Ancient Everton Toffee House and Mother Noblet's Toffee Shop were big fan favourites. Next, they say if you can't beat 'em, join 'em, and that's exactly what Ipswich Town did when it came to their nickname. The term Tractor Boys used to be chanted by their opponents as a way of putting the team down for their farming background. But during one game back in the late 90s, Ipswich were 1-0 up and they decided to flip the script. 1-0 to the Tractor Boys, they sang, and a new nickname was born. Let's head to Leicester, famous for more than just a red, well, orangey cheese and Jamie Vardy. Leicestershire's also the birthplace of fox hunting, hence the Foxes. Next up, turns out apples are not the only fruit that don't fall far from the tree. Bournemouth's nickname, the Cherries, comes from the fact the club's stadium was originally built right next to a bunch of cherry orchards. This next story actually involves two club nicknames. It started with Crystal Palace. They were having an absolute nightmare run back in the early 70s. They'd been relegated after a terrible spell and manager Malcolm Allison decided enough was enough. He wanted a new nickname, something strong, fast and destined for success. Something exactly like an eagle. But there's more to this one. Brighton were in search of a nickname too, and Palace finally gave them what they needed. In a heated match between the two back in 1976, Palace fans began chanting, "Eagles, Eagles." And some clever Brighton fans came up with the perfect reply, "Seagulls, Seagulls." Not all club nicknames have a crazy story though. Take the Gunners. That just comes from the fact a group of munitions workers in the Royal Arsenal factory in Woolwich set up the club in 1886. On the flip side, some nicknames seem simple, but there's a bit more to them, like West Ham. The Hammers is actually nothing to do with the ham part of the name. It comes from the fact the club used to be called Thames Ironworks FC and was made up of workmen and shipbuilders. So next time the away end's chanting their crazy nickname, you'll now know exactly where it came from.
Yeah, welcome one, welcome all to the final hour of tonight's edition of Trans-Europe Express, seeing you through to midnight. Me, Danny, Kelly, Andy Brassell very much on the firm as well. You lot, the listening millions, we're so glad to have you along for the ride. During the next 60 minutes, we'll be talking to our US correspondent Brian Sciaretta about yet another triumph for Lionel Messi and the retirement of two genuine legends of football over the last 20 years. Andy will take us around the leagues as well as giving us all the news from France we've so far missed out on. But first, it's time here on Trans-Europe Express to go transatlantic and join South America and our correspondent, friend and educator, Tim Vickery. Hi, Tim.
It's going to live up to a billing like that. Good evening, gentlemen. How are you doing?
Tim, it's the least you deserve. The show hangs on you every week. Look, the World Cup draw, I've already had my say about it. I found the whole thing implausibly weird and hopeless, both from a football and political point of view. How did it go down, and what are the reaction to the draw in South America?
the self-coronation, it did rather remind one of a kind of grotesque parody of Napoleon, did it not? Surely it would have been better. Instead of not tonight, Josephine, how about not this afternoon, Gianni Infantino? But there we go. I've written down, I've got all the entire programme of matches and the times that they're kicking off. Oh, it's exhausting. I'm tired already. And this, I think, see, on Friday, we only learned part of the draw. Yes. So many of the coaches were waiting for Saturday, the time and the place. Yeah. And just a quick example of that third group game, Scotland against Brazil, and how that's fired the Scots up while the draw was still on. My telephone was tinkling away with calls there from Glasgow. Could have. David Neary, was it? I'm going back. Yes, that's the one. Yeah, and Billy really Bremner missing from 2 yards in 1974. That could have been, and we didn't know the time, but it could have been Atlanta under the roof air conditioning or Miami. What have the Scots got? Oh dear, they've got Miami 6 o'clock in the afternoon. They will melt. It will be like Sevilla in 1982 when they took the lead and couldn't hold them. There's a lot to take in from the draw. There's so much to take in, or too much really. But one thing that just leaps out at me, Argentina. And part of the raison d'etre of the draw was to keep the first two seeds apart, Argentina and Spain. So if they win their groups, they meet in the final. However, by the luck of the draw, if one comes first in their group and the other comes second, they meet in the first knockout round.
Whoa!
Wow! Yes! Wow! And more on Argentina. 2 of their 3 group matches are in the air-conditioned stadiums. And if they win their group, 2 of their 4 knockout rounds on the way to the final are also in air-conditioned stadiums. So there's a powerful incentive there for Argentina to win their group and stay in the cool, because when looking at some of the kickoff times, especially once we get into the knockout phase, you do worry for the quality of the spectacle sometimes. On the last World Cup in the States, 1994, I remember I was at an event a few years ago with both of the coaches, Italy and Brazil, Pajera and Sacchi. And they both said it was just inhumane. Couldn't do it. And Donadoni, the midfielder, said to Sacchi at half-time, "Coach, if we go up the field, we ain't making it back." And you remember from that game that the great Italian defender, Franco Baresi, had come back from a knee operation after, I think he lost to some rabble called Ireland, and unless I'm much mistaken, Danny.
Yes, indeed,
I think you were there.
Yes, I was.
He had a knee operation soon afterwards, and he thought, well, that's it. And they brought him back for the final against Romario. And he put Romario in his pocket. And I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. And both the coaches were talking about it. And they said, look, in the conditions in which that World Cup was played, it was better to be injured than to be tired. So you do worry a little bit for the quality of the spectacle. Hopefully the weather will be kind to us all.
Although we should say, Tim, you can't always, the weather is so unpredictable, because I was at the World Cup in Germany, 20 years ago now, and every game I saw was played in 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's some of it's a gamble, isn't it?
And increasingly so with summer tournaments. It was because global warming and the rest of it. I saw Infantino the other day say he'd love to stage every World Cup in Qatar. No logistics, no travelling. Do it in November, December, and everyone's happy.
The phrase "I bet he would" comes to mind.
Yeah, although alcohol manufacturers would not be garnishing the fruits, would they, after what happened to them on the eve of the tournament? Anyway, we're in for an awful lot of football, and hopefully some of it is going to be great, and why not?
Yeah, and having gone to the Club World Cup last year, Tim, I would only echo your thoughts on climate unpredictability. I'm just hoping for lots of mentions of Don Howe from the '86 World Cup and his ice-cold towels in Mexico. But look, as you and Danny have been convincing me over recent weeks that Brazil really do have a chance under Carlo Ancelotti, Dorival Jr. has texted me and said, could we please talk about Brazilian coaches in Brazil? So Felipe Luis, 40 years old, he's won it all.
Yes, although there's an even bigger one now. They keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah, in midweek, and it's important that they did it with a round to spare. We've just had the last round of the Brazilian Championship, but in midweek, the penultimate round, Flamengo got over the line. Quite a nervy 1-0 win. It's what they needed at home against Ceará. Serie A, who were mid-table for almost the entire season, lost the last few games and found themselves relegated. And that's so important because in the last game, Flamengo could pick the reserves, because what they do now is they fly to Qatar, and on Wednesday for the Intercontinental. Now, I suspect that the Intercontinental Trophy is passing most of the UK audience by, with people thinking, well, hang on a minute, haven't we just had a Club World Cup? Isn't that? No, it's still here. On and on it goes. And the format now, it used to be, you will remember, it used to be that the South Americans were in one semi-final, the Europeans were in another. Now the Europeans are straight in the final, and the South Americans have to jump through a number of hoops in order to get there. So on Wednesday, Flamengo will face the champions of the CONCACAF region, Cruz Azul of Mexico. If they get through that, then on Saturday they face Pyramids of Egypt, champions of Africa, and then get through that, and then it's Paris Saint-Germain on Wednesday, I think Wednesday the 17th. So it ain't over yet for Filipe Luis. I remember what happened to Botafogo at this time last year, and they had to wait until the last round to seal the Brazilian title, and then it was off to the Middle East for their game, and they got done by the Mexican side because they could barely put one foot in front of the other. Flamengo had a few more days to rest. It is an old side, of that the starting lineup. 8 are 30 or over, and the others, one is 29, one's 27, one's 25. You kind of think it's going to catch up with them at some point, but this is taken very, very seriously in Brazil. They came short against Liverpool in 2019. They didn't make it even to the final. They got knocked out the semi-final a few years later. Which did for Victor Pereira, Portuguese coach, who more recently of Wolves. And there's a vibe going on at Flamengo at the moment that this could be the one. That they can beat Cruz Azul, Pyramids and Paris Saint-Germain. And what a year that would complete for them and Filipe Luis. But it is a lot of hoops to put these players jumping through.
That format is ridiculous. That's an end of that. I'm not going to say any more about that. Two names from Brazilian football that are absolutely legendary. Neymar, of course, and Santos. They're now, of course, one plays for the other. And they have combined to avoid the ignominy of relegation.
They have, yeah, at last. The last 3 games, Neymar played them despite needing a knee operation. It's only a minor knee operation, but it is worrying because he was out so long with a knee problem. So I think he's done this at personal risk to himself, decided to play these 3 games and delay this minor knee op. In Santos' favour was the fixture list. The first 2 were against 2 sides who'd already been relegated, and the third, just a few hours ago, was against a team who are in the semi-finals of the Cup in midweek, and so they played the reserves. So he hasn't come across any centre-backs thinking, you know what, that knee might... Let's have a test of that, shall we? Shall we test it? So people have stood off him. But he's certainly come up with the goods, and this is the first time in the season. The first win, they won them all 3-0. The first win, he scored 1 and made 1. The second win, he scored all 3. And he gave a couple of passes that were important in the goals today. It is the first time in the entire year that he's really done anything like that. It has kept Santos in the first division, and with 4 going down, the threat of relegation really, really looms large in Brazil. What happens now, we don't really know. His contract runs out at the end of the year. Santos, well, they're a small club, really. It's the city is less than 500,000, which by Brazilian standards is tiny. The cost benefit of him, when they're paying him a lot of money, and until these 3 games, he hasn't done very much. So there's financial pressure maybe to renegotiate this deal. After what he's done in the last week, it is possible that he could fix himself up with someone else, I think, in Brazil. The World Cup dream, then, is not necessarily over. When Ancelotti gets asked about this all the time, and he's saying, well, we're just in December and the World Cup's not till June. There is time, but he's got to get himself in form. You don't win World Cups against the calibre of opposition that he's just been playing against this week, but at least he's given himself a platform for next year.
So, Tim, is there a possibility that he finds himself back in Europe after Christmas? I'm not saying that would be the right thing for him physically, but is that the lesser of two evils in terms of if he can get over this knee operation in the next little while? If he does something in Europe for 6 months, does that not say more than starting the Brazilian Championship, where you think you've got the state championship before the league starts?
I bring news. New calendar, different calendar.
Okay.
Usually, historically, the Brazilian Championship doesn't get underway until this year. It was the end of March, last weekend in March. Now it starts end of January, last week in January.
Okay.
So that puts a whole new perspective on things. First of all, and I ask you the question, would a European club fancy paying what he would demand on a basis of very, very little? Could he fix himself up with a club? Secondly, if he does it for any Brazilian club, the bandwagon keeps rolling. So I would suspect it's far more likely that he stays in Brazil. I think that would give him the best chance. Also because I think it would give him the most chance of shining, in a more compact, quicker European football. I'm not sure. Certainly the Neymar that we've seen this year, I'm not sure he could hack it. His defence there would be, well, he's never really had enough of a sequence of games to be fit. We've never really seen Neymar firing on all cylinders all year. He now has to do that at the start of next year to get back, and I would imagine it's an easier task in Brazil than it would be trying to fix himself up with a European club, because he wouldn't get one of the big hitters, would he? He'd get a side who are struggling a little bit, and it would be harder to carry him. I think a Brazilian club can carry him.
Tim, absolutely fantastic as always. Thank you so very much indeed. Tim Vickery there. Next we'll be going north a couple of thousand miles and joining Brian Chiaretta to talk about the latest trophy in Lionel Messi's trophy-encrusted career. Yeah, there's NFL action this morning later on when you can listen to the Houston Texans at the Kansas City Chiefs live on talkSPORT 2 after our show from just after 1 a.m. A huge game as Kansas City, regular winners in recent years, struggle to make the playoffs. That's live NFL on talkSPORT 2 from just after 1 a.m. Yeah, let's stay in the United States now as well because they've had their cup final, the MLS Cup final. It was a 3-1 victory for Inter Miami against the Vancouver Whitecaps. Another triumph for Lionel Messi. To report on that and some very important retirements from professional football. Delighted to say we're joined now by our US correspondent, Brian Sciaretta. Hello, Brian.
Hey, good evening. Thank you very much for having me on.
Really glad to have you on, Brian. Let's talk about this final then. It was in Miami's home stadium, the Chase Stadium. They won 3-1. What was the game like?
I thought it was a well-played game by Vancouver. I thought that Vancouver, towards the end, when it was going to win it, but they hit the post at a dangerous time. Then soon after, Miami pulled ahead with Messi. Miami had the talent edge, but the luck also went that way. I mean, look, I thought it lived up to its billing. The most talented team in the league versus the most well-coached team in the league, and in the end, talent won.
And I mean, it's very difficult to measure Lionel Messi by a whole lot of ways, but he just keeps adding and adding to this trophy count. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, it is extraordinary. Everywhere he goes, he wins. Sometimes it doesn't always come smoothly. It took a while for him to win with Argentina. Eventually, that started happening. In the Copa, then the World Cup, and here it wasn't smooth at the start, but eventually he changed the narrative of it all, and they won, and they deserve to win.
And Brian, with them getting over the hump now in the Messi era, if you like, how does this affect, because we know he's staying for the duration, how does this affect how the end of his career maps out, both up to the World Cup and past that and into the next generation for Miami? Because I guess it removes a lot of pressure, doesn't it?
Yeah, it removes a lot of pressure. I mean, look, he's up against Father Time here, and Father Time wins all battles, as they like to say. At some point it will catch up to everybody. He's aging very well, and I think we'll see that at the World Cup too. But at some point, at what point do the wheels come off a little bit with him? I don't know. I mean, his legacy is now secure in Inter Miami. It was a great farewell, and look, they have to restock with a lot of players with retirements to Alba and Busquets, and we have to see what direction they're heading in right now. But look, it's it's obviously he's going to keep doing this as long as it is. It looks like he's having fun out there, which is like good to see.
Brian, I'll get your views on the World Cup draw and how it's affecting the USA and all the rest of it. But Andy, as Brian mentioned there, after the Cup final, Sergio Busquets and Jordi Alba both announced, or we knew they were retiring. They have now retired from professional football. Worth taking a minute, I think, to talk about the stellar careers they both enjoyed. And, of course, they were both part of that ridiculous Barcelona team of 12, 15 years ago. Yeah,
look, Alba was a defining left-back of his career. There's absolutely no doubt about that, of his generation.
The European Championship final against Italy, where he ran riot.
Yeah, that's right, in Kiev. But I guess Busquets is the one I'd really want to linger on, simply because he really defined the Pep Guardiola Barcelona era. You think he came into the team in Guardiola's first season, and it made a massive, massive difference to the way they played. I mean, I'm really fascinated to see if he does become a coach, what sort of coach he will be. He's one of those ones where you look at him and you do think, it's projecting from what he is as a player, but it feels like it would work. So I'm interested to see what happens next there. I wanted to ask you, Brian, about another veteran who was involved in this, and on the losing side, of course, Thomas Müller, who made an impact at the Vancouver Whitecaps, helped them get all the way to the final. How has Müller changed the narrative around the Whitecaps? Firstly, I suppose, what do we know about what he's going to do going forward? And secondly, how do Vancouver grow from here? Because all the little things, like, for example, you look at Hugo Lloris criticising their pitch, and perhaps that's not such big news if Muller's not on the team. So, you know, the Whitecaps are under some sort of scrutiny. Where do they go and where does he go from here?
Well, you know, Vancouver, it's interesting because they went. You know, and then all of a sudden throughout this season, even before Muller got there, look, they went to the CONCACAF Champions Cup final, which is this region's Champions League, through two Mexican teams. You know, and the fan base really started to gravitate towards this team well before even Muller. Muller was the cherry on the top, but like this thing had a lot of positive momentum going forward before that. So they got to really harness this and ask themselves tough questions. Look, they're in a tough situation with their stadium because it's owned by the city, and the city's not very cooperative with them wanting to go build their own stadium, which is one of the reasons why the team was for sale in the first place. So some of the things that regrettably are not in their control. But the more that they can grow the fan base, the more power they have over the politicians and the city and stuff to get things done the way that they want to get done. And I think that that's all in the way that a stadium with great grass and all this other stuff. That has to be just come with making this team so big where they can have a lot of influence on the direction of the city and some of the decisions that happen because they were denied their ability to build their own stadium. So, you know, it's a great story. The fans love them. They had a lot of neutral fans pulling for them in this game, and you know, kudos to them. It's just all about doing what they want to do because they want to do the right thing, and now it's just, you know, forcing the hand.
And I guess really, Brian, when you bear in mind what happened with the Grizzlies moving from Vancouver and the fact that they really struggled to attract a superstar. Of course, there's the infamous Steve Francis story of him not wanting to come and going to Houston in the end. The fact that they couldn't really sort of get a grip on the sport. How pivotal could this season be for sport in Vancouver with the Whitecaps doing what they've done and with Muller arriving?
Look, it's enormous, and I think, you know, you have to look at it in the aspect of Canada, where, you know, the NBA is not what you think in the United States. They're a hockey country, but soccer is really pushing through, or football is really pushing through, and there is a market for the Canucks, which are up there, and the Whitecaps to kind of lead the way. So, yeah, it can't just be the Canucks and everything else. And there is room for this team to really step up there as a second pillar in the sporting culture of that city, you know, in that country. So, yeah, you know, I think it was really important for Vancouver to do that. You know, Toronto's fallen on hard times. Montreal, you know, the ownership there is kind of a mess. But Vancouver looks like if they do things right, they could be the dominant force in Canada, you know, in terms of on the field. You know, as long as they can get towards that own stadium, that's really what it takes, and that needs momentum in terms of just fans and enthusiasm and stuff, and all that was a big hit this year.
And Brian, very quickly, I think the World Cup draw, let's forget the sort of global coronation aspect of it. In terms of football, the United States, a draw with Paraguay, Australia, and one of the still to be confirmed playoff qualifiers. That looks like a pretty gentle draw for America.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's always tough. I mean, Paraguay and Australia culturally really thrive in big games, you know, and big environments. They're very intense teams. You know, I wouldn't turn away the draw. I think it's, you know, about, you know, what the U.S. was hoping for. It was not. Anyone would call the group of death. It's manageable. I don't think any team's going to want to face it. The host country, the U.S. has to make themselves feared. I mean, they're the host country. Sometimes you never really want to face the host country, and so the U.S. has to kind of impose their will, no matter who they play. But I think it's going to be spirited competition, but overall good competition. I think it's a good draw. You know, they avoided any kind of political, you know, ties like you could get, you know, and you know, like they had last World Cup with Iran and stuff like that. With the United States, sometimes there's countries that you don't want to draw just because it brings in a circus media-wise about, like, you know, the politics of the environment. That's not the case right now. So I think that alone is a good thing.
Brian, a pleasure as always, and an education to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Trans-Europe Express. Brian Sciaretta there, bringing us all the latest from the United States. We'll come back in a few seconds' time. Andy needs to update us on what's been going on in football in France. Now listen to this, everybody. talkSPORT has teamed up with Pitch Experiences to bring you an all-out VIP experience at the PDC World Darts Championship at Alexander Palace on the 23rd of December. You and 3 mates can be living at large with platinum seats, fine dining, a complimentary bar and exclusive access to the 501 lounge with Russ the Voice Bray. Then it's straight to your prime table for the best view in the house as the darts drama unfolds. Now get ready for an unforgettable Ali Pali Christmas. Here's how to enter. For your chance to win, just text DARTS to 83338. Text costs £2 plus your standard network rate, or you can call 03434 217 508. The lines will close at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the 18th of December. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. It's 18 plus and UK residents only. So for your chance to win, do it now. Text DARTS to 83338. This is a network promotion. The full T's and C's are available at talksport.com. Okay, we haven't yet talked about football in France. And Andy, our headline is Mbappe beats Marseille because Kylian Mbappe has long departed the upper echelons of French football, but his younger brother is really starting to make an impression now. He's called in English, it looks like Ethan, but I believe it's Etan, yeah?
Yeah, that's right.
Etienne.
And he's someone who was a bit of the collateral damage from Mbappe's transfer, Mbappe Senior's transfer to Real Madrid, we have to say, because he'd got into the PSG first team on his own merits as a very different sort of player, a deep-lying midfielder. And PSG essentially washed their hands of him when Kylian went to Real Madrid. So he went across to Lille, which looked like a sensible move. He's still a teenager, a lot younger than his brother, of course, nearly 8 years younger than his brother. And he thought Lille is a great place to develop, only an hour up the road from Paris. And then last year, he just had this awful catalogue of injuries. Now, he's been gradually bled into the team this season. But what's been really interesting is that he showed up with big goals in big matches, and not just big goals, but absolutely brilliant finishes. And this was another example, the winner against Marseille on Friday night, which was vital for Lille. Of course, Marseille looking to go top of the league, at least temporarily. And instead, Lille beat them, went level on points with Marseille, which has created a gap from 4th to 5th, particularly with the results happening elsewhere this weekend. And it was brilliantly constructed as well. A fantastic pass, I have to tell you, from Nabil Bentaleb, which he took down. It was left foot all the way because Bentaleb, of course, left-footed. Etienne Mbappe left-footed as well. Took the pass down absolutely brilliantly. Long-range pass, dribbled it round Geronimo Rulli and slotted it in perfectly. So
it doesn't hurt me, Andy, because Nabil is a very talented footballer. We know that.
Yeah.
And he has publicly stated that when he dropped out of Spurs, as he did, because he couldn't be guaranteed a first-team spot, it's the biggest regret of his life.
Well, yeah, I mean, no one with a crystal ball could have seen quite how bad that Schalke move could have been, and not just because of him.
I know.
Not just because of him.
The club was in free fall, wasn't it? As you say, Paris Saint-Germain absolutely wrecked Rennes, 5-0. Something of a restatement of intent and talent by the great Kvaratskhelia.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. It's one of those games where you think, okay, this is PSG just doing what they do, but actually Rennes were pretty good for the first half hour, and Matvei Safonov, who came in, the Russian, to replace Lucas Chevalier, who wasn't fit to play, played really, really well in this first half hour, made a couple of really important saves. Rennes hit the woodwork as well. And then PSG took the lead almost against the run of play. And Kvaratskhelia getting himself a couple of goals. At the end of a week under which, as our pal Lee Davey has pointed out to us, he's received a lot of criticism, really, for his performances. And people have been asking, what's up with Kvaratskhelia? Now, we know his English is excellent, not so sure about his French. Well, maybe we know now because he's clearly been reading the papers this week. He came out as if he really had something to prove. Now, PSG not quite at full strength, but this was them showing exactly how good they can be.
Listen, Lens, after the results of the last few days, worth noting they're still top as we head towards Christmas. That's a very, very important thing, I think, for the French football. But Andy, I'm going to pass over Lens. Perhaps we'll talk about them in detail next week. But I really want to get something out of this story because this is the maddest story of the week. Lyon have revealed, because stuff keeps tumbling out of the cupboard, yet more insanity involving the reign of John Textor.
Well, that's right. They've been getting, it's been widely reported for a few weeks, some demands from a third party for money. And not a couple of quid here and there, but for fees totaling in excess of 100 million euros. And it's because John Textor, it seems, has spent over 100 million of Lyon's money on players that never played for Lyon and never belonged to Lyon.
What does that mean, Andy? Can you break that? What do you mean he bought 100 million pounds worth of players who didn't play for Olympic Lyon?
They play for Botafogo instead.
Oh,
so we're talking about
ridiculous.
The big one being Igor Jesus, who is of course at Nottingham Forest now, purchased, it seems, with around 41 million euros of Lyon's money and never set foot in the city. Now this debt has been sold on, as is often the case in football, to a third party, to a financing company, who are now asking for the money back. Now, since Textor is no longer at the club and the show's been run by Michel Kang and Michael Gerlinger, there's a bit of a sense of, we thought we had it all under control and maybe not. Now, of course, Textor, as is his general demeanour, has hit back and said the reporting by L'Equipe of this in particular was really dishonest, and this is something that happens all the time in football. And you'll find under my excellent reign that Lyon went from bottom to qualifying for Europe in the same season. I mean, he's kind of left out the bit about how they ended up bottom because they couldn't make any transfers because of his poor financial dealing and poor communication of that dealing to the DNCG. But with the DNCG sitting, that's the French Financial Control Board at the moment, and doing all their sums, I bet they're just reading this story thinking, thank God we don't have to deal with this guy again.
Yeah, and of course, with the mainstream media lying now about John Textor and his greatness, presumably it's left to Gianni Infantino to give him some kind of global prize for his brilliant contribution to football, French football, and Lyon in particular. My star of the week is a name from the distant past, if you're a European football fan. André-Pierre Gignac, 40 caps for France. He's just turned 40. You might think he's been in retirement. Of course, he had a brilliant career in Europe and played many times up front for France. But he's gone to Mexico a decade ago to play for Tigres, one of their leading clubs. And this week he scored again. And he has now got 221 goals for Tigres. He is the all-time top scorer. He's had a whole second career, and he's heading for a sixth title with Tigres. So Gignac, who, as I say, I've thought was already long since on the chaise longue in his house, having been hand-fed grapes in retirement, still knocking them in for Tigres in Mexico. Who's your star of the week, Andy?
Yeah, we need to bring back cult heroes for him, I think, don't we?
Totally, 100%.
I've gone for a centre forward who is in Liga, who's pretty much half his age. Emerson, Brazilian, 21, built like an absolute cupboard, and has made a massive impression for Toulouse so far. He scored the winner against Strasbourg this weekend. Liam Rosinia's side kind of in free fall at the moment. They've lost 4 of their last 5, and they're now in 8th position, having looked well set for the Champions League a little while ago. But they couldn't deal with Emerson at all. Just as Lyon couldn't, he scored the winner against them for his first goal in French football, and he scored against Marseille last week, one of the ones that stopped them going top of the league. So one to watch in the coming months.
You're heading now for the finishing line here on Trans-Europe Express. Don't go anywhere else. Still loads to entertain you here on talkSPORT through the night. But next up, Andy, we're taking around the leagues. And when I say it's been a mad week in Turkish football, you'll just have to take that at face value. Yeah, about 7 or 8 minutes, Andy, for us to go around the leagues now before we finish, and the best of talkSPORT Daily will entertain you into the small hours, and Paul Ross will join us after that. Let's start then in Turkey, where I will say it's a slightly mad week, because between the actual football, the betting scandal, and much else besides, it's always great stories. And tomorrow night promises to, when Fenerbahce play Galatasaray, there's always something on the line.
Yeah, that's right. So that's where we start. Back on Monday, it feels a lot longer ago when Galatasaray...
They had played, yeah.
Galatasaray played in Karaköy against Fenerbahce and had it under control for most of it. Leroy Sané scored a brilliant goal with the aid of a deflection to put Galatasaray in front, and they defended like they were completely on top of the game. And then John Duran, he just makes stuff happen, doesn't he? He came on, didn't really do much, and then scored a brilliant header in the 5th minute of stoppage time. Now, of course, at the back of this, you had Galatasaray complaining a lot about the refereeing, and they've spent most of the days since then doing that. Then, on Friday night, Galatasaray were the first to play again. They played Samsunspor, finished 3rd last season under the German Thomas Reis. So one of the tougher games of the season, I think it's fair to say. Galatasaray showed a bit of tiredness, I guess, in going 2-0 up and then losing that 2-0 lead, until Victor Osimhen scored one of the goals of the season in stoppage time, his 2nd of the game. Brilliant overhead kick. And you think, that's it. Well, it's not, because it looks like a really clear handball from Kazimcan, the left back. Should be a penalty for Samsunspor. They don't get it. The game finishes seconds later, and that's it. Galatasaray are 3-2 winners and back on the horse. So clearly, not just the president of Samsunspor, but the president of Fenerbahce, who actually put out a statement saying, we have never talked about refs. Interesting point of view. And Trabzonspor complaining about that as well, and understandably to an extent. But given that this is a week as well in which the captain of Fenerbahce, the club captain of Fenerbahce, Ömer Hakan Hantas, has been detained due to allegedly betting through a third party. Bear in mind that there are other players from big clubs who've been detained for this as well. And then Fenerbahce dropped a couple of points away at Nuri Şahin's Başakşehir. Başakşehir were excellent as well. I think that was really the notable thing about Turkish football this weekend, that both the two big teams were so knackered from the derby that they gave slightly uneven performances in their game, and an equaliser conceded after Milan Skriniar had given them the lead by Bertu in the last 10 minutes of that game, giving Başakşehir a more than merited draw, which extends Galatasaray's lead at the top to 3 points.
Yeah, and in a country where players and officials alike are under massive investigation for betting offences, every controversial refereeing decision is going to be scrutinised even more closely. Let's move to the Netherlands. Troy Parrott scored again, and he is in great form this year, as we know, and helping the Republic of Ireland through to the playoffs for a place in the World Cup. But he's been outscored this weekend by a very different player, a Japanese striker.
Yeah, he has. So Ayazi Aida, who's been really, really great this season. So Ueda has got 18 goals now in 15 starts, which is pretty spectacular by any standards. I know people will think of Alfonso Alves and previous great goal scorers of the Eredivisie who never did anything elsewhere. And look,
Vincent Janssen,
if Feyenoord looked for a way to sell him for big money at the end of the season, it would not surprise me one little bit. But 6-1 winners over Pek Zwolle, in which they played really well. And look, Feyenoord have needed this, because if you look at what happened, really, the mini terrible run they went on recently, including that defeat to Celtic, the fact that they've won the last 2 league games to stay in touch with PSV Eindhoven, who are absolutely unstoppable at the moment. They won 2-0 at Heerenveen yesterday, which keeps them 6 points clear, which keeps them on this incredible run, and a goal for Ricardo Pepi in that. It's exactly what Feyenoord needed right at this moment. Unbelievably, all of the big three won this weekend because despite conceding a goal in the first 4.5 minutes, Ajax won at Fortuna Sittard. Now, look, they're a little bit fortunate. You'll see on the highlights the Owen Wijndal goal, which he smashed in from miles out, which was a brilliant goal. But actually, their first 2 goals were own goals. And the first one of those was scored while Fortuna were down to 10 men because Kasper Dolberg had, unbeknownst to the referee, elbowed one of the Fortuna players in the head, and he was off getting his head glued at the time when Ajax scored this goal, or when Fortuna scored it for them.
Very quickly, Andy, because we're running out of time, tell us about Portugal.
Well, the big thing this weekend is it's all coming up Porto. They won 2-0 tonight at Tondela with goals from Samu and William Gomes, the young Brazilian player who's been brilliant this season. And that was all made possible by Benfica and Sporting cancelling each other out on Friday night in the derby of the Segundo Circular. Early goal for Pedro Gonçalves, equaliser for Georgi Sudakov. And it was all really respectful, actually, between Rui Borges, the Sporting coach, who, as I was saying before, really underrated coach, and Jose Mourinho, who actually has got Benfica playing quite well. It's making me feel weird, all this calmness.
Yeah, that's not right. We do still have 45 seconds, Andy, to talk about Belgium, where I guess the big news is that Club Brugge fall even further behind.
Yeah, that's right. They lost to St. Sweden this weekend, which was a bit of a surprise because if you look at the games yesterday, Union Saint-Gilloise could get it over the line against Ghent as well. They dropped a couple of points there in a 1-1 draw, but they're still 4 points clear, with the big move being St. Sweden leapfrogging Club Brugge into second. Of course, it really starts mattering at the playoffs, so no panic just yet.
Where is your amazing peripatetic nomadic lifestyle taking you this week, Andy?
Well, as you know, I would normally be at Spurs on a Champions League night, but no, not this Tuesday. So you know what? The one London League ground I've not been to is Barnet. I might go there. Okay,
listen, thank you very, very much indeed. Well, what an amazing week it's been. A World Cup draw that was as notable for what happened prior to the computer filling out the fixtures for the early stages of the upcoming World Cup. Preview, of course, here of Champions League games that suddenly start to really matter with 3 games to go. Many of those games live here on talkSPORT, as I've been telling you about. Really terrible scenes in Nice that have led to 2 of their players being given the week off because of mental and physical injury, according to the players themselves. I have to be careful what I say there because other people are denying the physical part of it, and much else besides. Been another amazing week in European football. Thank you all for listening to us for the past 3 hours. We could do 5 hours of this if we were given the leeway. In our poll, a slight majority of you, 42%, think Spain are liable to win the World Cup. Coming up next here on talkSPORT, it's the best of the talkSPORT Daily. I'll be back on H&J at about 1:15 tomorrow. Till then, God bless you all. Thanks for listening and good night.